Hi, everybody. Welcome back. We hope that you were able to join us for our last session on how independent agents can compete with direct carriers. So now that you've had a short break, we're really happy you can join us now for this session on what carriers are doing with APIs and how that connectivity is benefiting their agency partners. For those of you who might be joining us for the first time, I'm Ginny Winkworth. I'm Program Manager for ACT. Wanted to remind everyone that all the attendees are muted. However, we do welcome your questions. So please feel free to use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen and submit your questions. We've got some time set aside at the end of our panel discussion to answer those questions. So stick around at the end. Our panelists are going to be happy to answer those questions that we gather during the session and also any questions you'd like to ask during that Q&A portion. So next up is Ron Berg, ACT's Executive Director, who's going to do a few introductions and get our conversation started. So Ron, take it away.
Thanks, Ginny. I'm very excited to kick off this part of the ACT Tech Summit with a discussion on carrier APIs. We've heard a lot of discussion around APIs, certainly, and certainly the term gets tossed around in conversation a lot. But what we'd like to do is dive into the specific areas that carriers in particular are focusing on, what the path forward looks like, and maybe dispel some misconceptions on strategy at the same time as well. But before we do that, let's meet our panelists. First, I'd like to introduce Jim Rogers of the Hartford. Jim, it's great to have you with us today. You've certainly held a wide variety of positions across your career. Would you take a minute just to share your current role with the Hartford and some of your background, please?
Sure. Thanks, Ron, for inviting me and looking forward to the discussion. Currently, I'm with the Hartford and I lead our agency automation across the enterprise. So most of the typical connectivity and interface connectivity we do for acquisition service is what I do. I started my career out as an agent, actually, and then progressed through my career both on the software vendor side and on the carrier side. So I'm fortunate now I sit on the NetView Executive Board, ID Federation. I work with ACT and Augie a lot too, and Accord. So thanks for having me here, Ron.
You're welcome. I'm glad you could fit us in your busy schedule.
No.
So our other panelist I'd love to welcome is Lucas Welchans of Nationwide Insurance. Lucas, welcome, and please tell us a little bit more about your current role with Nationwide and your background as well.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, my name is Lucas Welchans. I come from Nationwide Insurance. Currently, I'm a senior consultant for independent agent technology, which is a lot of words to say that I work in the sales experience silo, so I'm actually in the sales side of things, but I'm the liaison that works with our IT department on a regular basis, trying to help explain both directions, how things can be better. My background comes from Allied in supporting independent agents. So especially here at Nationwide, it's not news to anybody that's kind of our new go forward agency model. So these insights I have to use on a regular basis to help support our internal folks, making sure that we're building the right tools at the right time that'll actually help agents service their customers.
Great. Again, thanks guys for joining us for this conversation. So let's get right to it. As I said, there's so much discussion on APIs versus webhooks versus web services. Could you take a few minutes each to begin our discussion on what API connectivity means from your carrier lens, and maybe some examples of valuable APIs versus what you hear discussion about where you may not see as much immediate value, at least. And Jim, I'll ask you to start.
Sure. When we think about connectivity in general, like how are we going to continue to maintain and modernize all the experiences that our agents and brokers want to have with the carriers? And when we look at that, the way we do it is building these sort of microservices, small APIs that enable certain experiences. And, it's the backbone for how we connect out into the industry. And, I would say we look at different types of APIs. I'll focus a little bit of our conversation on the commercial side. We've had APIs in the personal line space for a long time, but we see more and more, I think, Ron, coming out in the commercial line side of the space. And whether you start that journey with just trying to classify a risk, that could be a service, or what type of business do we like to write, that could be an API, or quoting a piece of business could be another. So I think there's different aspects that as we look at that journey, we put together these what we call APIs. And I think you're seeing, Ron, a lot of carriers diving into that space.
Nationwide, at least I'm sure this isn't unique to Nationwide, but organically, we started with, I'll say, quote and bind APIs, things that would get an agent a sale
right.
from some different from some vector or another. And those have had success. I think, Ron, you asked, where are the most important APIs in the future? Where are they coming from? Or where are we thinking of going next? My opinion, something I advocate for, not just Nationwide, anywhere, is servicing APIs. The idea that is a catch-22. The better we do with implementing sales and quote and bind APIs, things that get dollars and policies onto the agent's book. If you do too good of a job and we don't have these servicing APIs to go with it, it's not going to be sustainable. So that's where I'm advocating internally, is to make sure that while it might not be the prettiest thing to put in the window storefront, the servicing APIs, it's not going to bring us in dollars. It is very necessary to the agents that we're trying to support.
And that's a great point, Lucas, as well as what Jim alluded to, that balance of appetite versus services. It's no different in what agents go through in building their workflows. If you've got too much coming in the front end of the funnel and you're not there staffed, your workflow to be able to handle the service aspect, it's not a good balance, and no different for APIs. So let's talk then about what your primary goals are in approaching any particular API or engagement. So best case, what should it enable? What are the workflow improvements, things like that? And Lucas, we'll stick with you on that.
Sure. I'll stick with the sort of the business side of things, since that's my forte. I guess my experience with APIs is normally, not to be too facetious here, but the experience is usually somebody that doesn't quite know what they want saying, can we just throw an API at this? And so often the conversation starts off with, we could, absolutely, because the answer to that is always yes. It doesn't matter what you ask, can we throw an API at it? Yeah. What is it that you're trying to do, or what is it you're trying to accomplish? And it usually takes a couple whys to get to what they're really after. You can offer, because APIs could just support the status quo, and we could do the same thing you're doing today, but the back end is through APIs instead of maybe a batch service or something like that. But that's usually not what people are actually asking for. They're like, no, I want this different experience is what I'm really after. And that's usually my goal when I approach an API engagement. I usually get wary as soon as somebody says, we've got an API engagement, because it means I'm going to have this conversation. The best case scenario is when somebody comes to us with a use case, and then our IT department says, somebody, like a Jim Rogers or somebody from our IT department that could say, we have something for this already kind of created, and we can tweak it a little bit to fully meet your need. Jim, I'll kind of hand it over to you. Once the business nerds come to you with an actual use case.
Yeah, I think you hit it right on the spot, Lucas. I mean, what is the problem you're trying to solve? And what is that great customer experience you want to create? Those are the two fundamental questions, Ron. I hear it from Lucas when we've interacted before, and actually from the Hartford. Those are our two big questions when you come and approach us and say, we want to do X, Y, and Z. And sometimes they come with solutions. We just want your API. I'm like, well, no. What problem are you trying to solve? What's the customer experience you want to create?
Right.
And then we take the assets that we have and we kind of start to marry them out. And I would say in our approaching that, piece, we look at kind of storyboarding that process out before all the connectivity and all that, like kind of what's the flow? How would that work? Use case scenario it out. If that all makes sense, then we create an engagement.
And Jim, I know you, I've known you for a long time. I've been fortunate to have worked together. You're a yes guy at heart. You want to get to yes, but there's a lot of considerations, right? And also you want to be able to use that not just for that one use case, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, we would never create an API just for one use case. So, we hope to use that. I mean, some of them recently we've had, 20, 30 implementations of the exact same API. It's interesting you brought up service side, right? When you look at the transaction types we have in the industry, service transactions endorsements are number one. Number one and is endorsement transactions. And those are very interesting because sometimes there's a lot of work there and you're not getting a lot of more dollars or profit on that, right? So anyway, we can streamline that process, digitize it more, and have a better customer experience. So when we've seen a lot of use cases really on the growth side, Ron, but right. I think over the next 2-3 years is what Lucas is saying. Like, I agree, like service is going to be, and it already has started. We surpassed a goal here we had at the Hartford of getting more digital service transactions, either started in a management system, finished in our system or something, doing digitally, than getting them via email. Right, that's big. You know what I mean? And APIs are going to allow us to keep building on that momentum as we go.
And that gets to that goal of driving not only the customer, but the agency also where they want to be, enabling that, correct?
Yeah, that's, Ron, earlier when I alluded to like the use case, let's just call one out so people have an example of kind of what we're talking about. The easiest one, and Jim, I'm going to steal one of your use cases from our earlier sessions, but just the making a payment. So something as simple as making a payment. The status quo today for most agents, most scenarios, is even in the best case, it's being directed, maybe a deep launch to somewhere else on the policy platform or some kind of carrier portal that would allow you to pay that bill. In a perfect world, it's somewhat easy. But let's take a couple steps back. You're still starting off in a management system, being directed by a comptroller, ending up on a third, at another location, and then performing your action. If an agent came to us and said that, no agent would have asked for that, right?
Right.
That is just the necessary evils of what technology was available at the time we built these things. The use case today, if we're asking enough questions, why enough times, I imagine an agent doesn't want to go anywhere. I'm in a management system. I'm clicking on, I can see how much the bill is. Why isn't that I can't, in a perfect scenario, an API would pop something open inside the management system, allow them to do some very simple transactions. And then the APIs, these widgets kind of go behind the scenes, do what they need to do with the carrier, send back a success message. That's the brave new world. That's the perfect case scenario, right? And that's the experience that we're trying to get to with all of these things, which is that actually a different experience for the agent. Wow, I didn't even have to deal with any other logins. I didn't go anywhere else. I just stayed where I was at, got my work done, and moved on to the next transaction.
Staying in their preferred workflow, that ease of doing business. So you brought up a couple points right there that I want to make sure what we talk about, because we're kind of circling around it. You've talked about how you start looking at any particular APIs, but I want to dive in a little bit more, tweak it just a little bit to talk about the primary areas and concerns maybe that you have to consider when you're standing up an API service, because it's not just you saying, standing this up, good to go. It's partnership. Jim, can you talk a little bit about those thought areas, those concerns that you consider when you do enter?
I think you got if they can get past what's the problem you're trying to on the customer experience. Now we're into what capabilities does this agent or broker or third-party technology firm maybe we be partnering with have? Are they familiar with sort of JSON-based APIs? Have they worked on developer portals before? Have they integrated APIs already? So we will have some due diligence, Ron, around that. And we've kind of gone through this a few times. And I know we sort of hone in on what's the areas that we like. We asked some questions, Ron, as you would know, on security. What's your security platform? What does it look like? How are you going to integrate from a security perspective? So yeah, we have a vetting process. I wouldn't say it's lengthy, but we're going to have some due diligence around that. In some cases, we'll help them out a little bit. I mean, we're not really looking to do that. We're not like a software development company, we're an insurance company. So we're hoping they bring those skill sets to the table, or they've sourced with a partner that has that ability.
Lucas, similar for you. I know that, thanks, Jim. I know that, like the Hartford, Lucas, Nationwide is not shy on working with not only the agents, not only the management systems, but there's a lot of distribution channels out there at play. So is it similar for you? Do you take any different kind of tack?
No, I mean, Jim, that's, I mean, it's well said. I'll try to add some color commentary again from the business side. This is all I can do. So, I mean, everything Jim says is correct. They have to be able to they have to have the chops to use them. APIs are a sharp knife, and you want to make sure you hand it to somebody that knows how to handle it. They're not going to hurt themselves or misuse it. So there are everything that goes into making sure that somebody is able to use this tool. From a sales side, I'll say that something I've been kind of circling around is this partnership. I mean, we as a carrier and Hartford's another one that we're chasing. There's a ton of carriers that are starting to dip their toe into this, having APIs, having some sort of portal you can register into to have access to these JSON and the documentation, development kits, if in a perfect world with good documentation. We have those. Carriers are starting to have those. So now the conversation is changing. It started off as just, carriers, you need to provide these things. And the conversation was just, let us know when it's there. Well, now carriers, we have them. We would love to make more of them and have that be more finer grained and have, more options there. But for the most part, we have them. We're kind of at an impasse now. We're at the mercy of these distribution platforms, management systems, things that have, I'll call it status quo, processes that work, but could be better. There's
legacy.
The incentive isn't there yet until agents realize what is possible and ask for it, right? And I think that's coming. We're at the mercy of these management systems and any other third-party vendor to be able to consume those APIs and implement them on their side, which we as carriers don't have a ton of say in unless you're an early adopter. And so that's kind of where we're at today, is working with a lot of I say management systems because that's the lion's share of our agency force. But there's some alternative distribution places that have a similar need. And the conversations are always the same. I'm trying to get them to move away from batch processes just because they work. They're expensive, and they're expensive for everyone involved. Whether or not an agent's paying that invoice themselves costs, I mean, those things cost money. And that's one of the pros of the API, is that we can reduce those costs, move those funds to places that can elevate the experience.
Well said. And that the management systems have the appetite for integrating those and opening up the APIs. It's a matter of where they are in their overall platform interaction enablement. I just have to comment, Lucas, I love that comment that you said, or the analogy, APIs are a sharp knife. I thought of it sounds like a song lyric, but it's
I cut myself with my chef's knife yesterday, so that's it's top of mind. It's like, I don't think I have the skills to be using this right now.
Oh no, Ron may riff out on that one, so we'll have to watch where
yours.
his head's thinking.
It's yours.
Yeah.
So we talked about this a little earlier in what you're looking at, where you're going, and I know that we're not going to ask you to give away the secret sauce, that you really can't to that level. But what general areas are you looking at for the future that you feel can really make a difference for your companies? You talked a little bit about service. I heard, small commercial, which is it has been recently a very hot area for innovation. So what are the areas that you're looking at for the future that you really feel can make a difference, not only for your companies, but your tech partners? And Lucas, since you spoke last, I'll start with you, or I'll ask you to start.
Again, relationship, the business or the sales side of things is where I think that, at least nationwide, that's our next steps, is where I think we're looking to improve. As we have APIs, our IT department, we have a decent amount of APIs. We have, it's not a secret, came from a direct channel. We have a website. The APIs are there. Where we're looking for, in terms of improvement, is the consumption and use of that by a third-party developer, by an AMS system, by a distribution platform. So we're working on improving our partner portal. I mean, that's not really secret sauce. It's just, that's where we're looking to improve. The documentation, the consumption of it, the feedback loops of, hey, this was great. We could really use it. It would be better if this was more fine-grained, or if this documentation was defined a little bit better. That's where we're looking to improve, at least specifically at Nationwide over the next couple of years.
Jim, your side?
Yeah, I'm similar. I think what we're seeing, Ron, is we've had some early, over the last 1 or 2 years, we've brought up some more partners. We have a lot of learnings there, and allows us to like scale, Ron. We've got to scale. And so although the APIs will scale fine, it's more of partnership scale, I think. Like, how can we bring on more partnerships and not have to incrementally increase resources on our side, but have the tools, the Swagger documentation, like Lucas is pointing to, and really have what it is. Because, in these partnerships, our customer is actually the developer. You know what I mean? It's like we have to put developer portals together. We're talking to developers. They need to be able to see the information, touch it, just how they want to do it. It's a little different than, say, building an agency portal where our endpoint is maybe the agent.
Right.
In this case, a lot of it is it's the agent driving the experience and helping us with the business model and the benefits, but actual implementation, it's the developers actually accessing our portals and that. So I think we will continue to create more microservices, Ron. For the Hartford, we will go down more deeper. I think you'll see us into service transactions, like literally endorsements and things like that. We've created the ability to do all of that for commercial lines over the last 2 years. Now you'll see us externalize out some of those and look for opportunities where it makes sense, to grow that digital experience.
And so let's peel back that's great insight, Jim. Let's peel back that just a little bit more, because there's got to be internal to Nationwide, internal to the Hartford, more groups that are looking to get more from the data, from being able to use innovations maybe under the AI side. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I can. I mean, when you're running, say, a quote API, it's not like the old days, Ron, where we had to have 10 questions or whatever. A lot of ours for small have none. But the only reason they don't have any questions is because of all the data scientists, of all the third-party data, of all the machine learning. All of it's running behind the scenes. So I guess anybody could create an API. But can you create APIs that can classify the risk, know the appetite, price it, for the risk attributes that you have, and be profitable at it, Ron, and be profitable.
Jim,
that's an art. You know what I mean? That's an art, Ron. And
there's no secret sauce. I mean, I was struggling about this question earlier. APIs, that's kind of the definition of an API. There's no secret sauce. The idea is that it's a public portal. You want to come look at it? I mean, there's a little bit of registration, but if you're a skilled developer and you want to leverage this to help you, there it is. Like, the whole point is that there's no secret sauce. Jim, if there's anything like a secret sauce, it's the same thing that you do with any other good IT project, which is apply your knowledge and your skill sets that you have with machine learning and anything that you can bring to bear. The APIs aren't the secret sauce. That's sort of like the public,
right.
Like
when they send in their request, I mean, in a couple seconds, we're running unbelievable amounts of data on a couple things you sent us and saying, hell yeah, we want this. Or, oh, you'd like to, add a dump truck. I'm like, oh, geez, a regular pickup truck, no problem. Here you go. There's the cost. You want to issue that endorsement? Great. But, there's just a lot. I mean, Ron, we buy data. You're seeing, a lot of the companies buy third-party data. but we have so much data ourselves as
Yes.
carriers that it's our job to mine our own data to see our own insights. When we have that many customers, it tells us a lot about what like small business owners are doing. How do they adjust? What's the profiles of them? What's the what makes a profitable risk and an unprofitable? But all of that is like that's where all those data scientists are. From that point of view, yeah, we don't expose that information out. It just runs behind the scenes, right?
Right.
But Jim, I assume you probably use it for the same thing that we'd be using it for, which is to turn that back around and to help give guided workflow, suggestions to the agents through some,
Yeah.
I mean, I assume through some sort of download, right? But it's like
Yeah.
you use that information, and I think that there's a lot of, at least in the past, I'm thinking, early 2000s, thinking of, oh, carriers got a lot of data. What are they using it for? I mean, we're using it to help make recommendations back to
Right.
back to these agents, and so that's really the overall intent, is to send those insights or to share them back.
I think the existing APIs, that's a great point, Lucas. I think the existing APIs we have specifically around quoting and things like that, with the cyber risks we see out there, Ron, and all the work Act's been talking about that, like when you're quoting a piece of business, I think you will see the APIs and the recommendation engines start to kick in a little bit more, just to make sure that customers understand that you asked for this, but boy, in your industry, cyber is a big deal, and maybe you need a cyber coverage or something like that. So I think, Ron, although maybe not all that is there today, but I think you'll start to see some of those engines and some of these things, being replied back in our APIs.
Wow. And that's great discussion. I loved hearing kind of the dispelling the myth of, there's a lot of secret sauce. It's the reverse, to Lucas's point, and maybe kind of focusing on, okay, let's raise the level and look at the art of the possible around what we can integrate and bring forth. So I think that's fantastic. What I kind of want to wrap up with is something that I heard a little earlier about, agents and where they can take things. What does all of this mean for agents that are more tech forward, that may have a management system, but also their own CRM or other integration? And they want to funnel business directly with their carrier partners. Is that doable? Are you doing it now? How do they proceed? What are the steps that they need to take, and what kind of turnaround time might that look like? Knowing that it depends. So Jim, I'll throw that at you. What do you say about that?
Yeah, we've seen classification. I mean, if we go back to the sort of acquisition side, and that, what I've seen is some agents have great program business, like they specialize in a couple niches. And what we've seen is they could put something on their website that's really geared towards a certain industry. I don't know, like photographers, or pick whatever like they're really good at.
Food
Pet,
trucks,
food trucks,
microbreweries.
whatever. Yeah, pick your thing. And they just put up a little website, and it just says for microbreweries. And then we say, here's our API, and it quotes. You know what I mean? The thing is what I've seen is sometimes, and this is in the vetting, which we talked about before, Ron, is like sometimes they're great at SEO and driving customers to their website, but not so good at finishing the sale. Or sometimes they're great salespeople, but they can't drive the flow. And so, what I see is when they're niched like that, or they have programs type like that, I think we'll see us do more and more. It's a nice place for an agent that's tech savvy, like you're saying, to start, because it's not boiling the ocean. It's not every type of risk that could come to their agency, but it's an interesting way to dip your toes in the water and to build a relationship.
Yes.
If that goes well, let's see, we could do more. Or sometimes agents, we've had them where the APIs, they just can't handle all the flow. So then what, Ron? What do we do? Like sometimes we transfer it into our internal sales team to help the agent sell it with the insured. It's still the agent's business and all that, but it just helps them build scale. So I think you will see us. I think that's one way that we're using the APIs with the agents and just kind of seeing what use cases they have there. I don't know, Lucas.
Yeah, you actually reminded me of a couple other scenarios that I hadn't really thought of.
Yeah.
There's a couple of different ways that agents can leverage this. If you're a tech savvy agent, and how do I drive this forward? How do we get to this brave new world sooner, right? There's not really a wrong answer. There's not really a wrong answer, because I've seen, to Jim's point, there have been some of the early adopters that know, look, I know that maybe my management system doesn't have the ability to do this, but you as a carrier do. Let's do this one, because we've done similar things where it's just one sector of business on a website, and we really just give them an API. They create the website, plug it on there, and and they're just quoting like maybe one type of program business with us. And it's not it's not that complicated. It's also not really that scalable, but it does really help that one agent with what they need to do, and it didn't really cost us much to do so. But that's kind of why I would like to talk about a couple other scenarios, because that's all well and good. I do think that's like the last 5 years. Like this year, like a different scenario has been agents going almost above and beyond. Some of them are starting their own like startup tech companies and trying to leverage, kind of create their own platform, like a management system amalgamation, their own suite, right? And that's possible. I've seen some fail. I've seen some do great. It's a completely different mindset than running an agency. It's running a software development company. Some people do just fine at it. But I would say that this is Lucas's opinion. I think that the lion's share, the 80-20 rule, are these agents that are in the middle. They're using some management system. They're know enough to be dangerous. They know what's possible. They don't necessarily know how to do it. And they're probably wary about hiring a developer. They've probably never done that before.
Yeah.
Right.
And they're like, is that really what I need to do? My opinion is that I think what will happen in the coming years is that this need will be seen. And I don't have to tell anybody that, it's not best case scenario that I only have one carrier being quoted on your website. It works. But if you're an agent, it'd be nice to have a couple carriers on there getting quoted, right? To do that, you have to use some sort of third party, right? It's going to be your management system. So I would just say, lean on your management systems to say, I would really like to stay in my own ecosystem more. It's not news to them. And we are telling them the same thing. And I don't mean to be contentious by saying that, but I am very passionate that is what will make the most agents satisfied. They're already buying and using these tools. They don't want to leave this tool to go someplace else. As swanky as we can make it, they want to stay in their own ecosystem. And that's what I would say. If you're tech savvy agent, ask for these things of your management system and of your carriers both.
Yes.
And hopefully in the future we can partner with these partners.
And that's a critical part about it, is having that conversation, using the platforms that you have as an agent, whether it be your management system, user group, direct contact with your management system, with your carriers. Lucas, you'd mentioned earlier a partner development portal, and I know that both of you have versions of that stood up. So I think that would be the big thing that I would wrap that thought up with. And thanks for making that point, Lucas. That it's making sure that you're clear about what you want, how it fits in your workflow, and having those conversations to kind of help define what is possible and how that could work. All right, guys, that was some great conversation. The time just flew. I know that we could take a lot of hard lefts, hard rights on it, but I think it was really good. And I know that we're going to get, I haven't seen anything, but I know we're going to get some questions. So I think what we'll do at this point is wrap the session and head towards Q&A. But I want to take, before we do, I want to thank you both, Jim Rogers of the Hartford, Lucas Welchans of Nationwide. Thank you guys for your time and insights in the overall discussion.
Happy to be here.
Oh, I'm glad to be here.
All right, we'll wrap this part of it and we'll head to Q&A. All right. So we've got a few questions, and guys, a couple of them are a little bit more general, but talk about partnerships. There's one that's pretty specific. I want to start with kind of the general ones because they kind of harken back to what we just, some parts of what we just talked about. So, and I'm going to kind of summarize one of the questions. So the question is to you, are there APIs at your carriers open to any agency size? And do those usually have any type of cost associated to the agency? This attendee gives an example that some vendors do offer APIs to agencies, but the cost is so high that it's, in his or her view, just meant for 2% of agencies. So the first question, are the APIs open to any agency size? Whoever wants to start with that one.
Jim, I'll stumble through it first, and we'll
I'll follow you.
You can
Sure.
bring it home. Yeah, I know that's probably the perception, just because of the last 5 years or so of like what it would have taken to have stood up some of these things from scratch. Anymore, that's not necessarily the case. As we kind of mentioned earlier, it has more to do with skill set than the size of your agency. Because the misnomer, because the misnomer is more about the costs that are involved. They're usually not saying, "Well, we're going to charge you this much to use it." It's usually more akin to, it's going to cost us as a carrier this much to do what you're actually asking for, because it's not necessarily an off-the-shelf API. Sometimes it's the ask, it's different. Sometimes it's the API that's not fine-grained enough, whatever it might be. But for the most part, I would just recommend, a lot of carriers, including Nationwide, have these, I'll call them API portals, where you can get registered, right? And check some of these things out. I would just say, don't be scared as an agency to request some of these. There's not a lot of overhead to at least to get in and see them. If what you see doesn't scare you right away, that's usually a good sign. But I would just say, usually those costs are usually development costs, and then they're usually outside the API. If it's off the shelf, usually there's not a ton of costs involved. So we're usually talking about some kind of other fee. But for the most part, if somebody's savvy enough to use it and take it off the shelf, it might be if it's a very large engagement, there might be a commission discussion or something like that. For the most part, though, at least in my experience, there hasn't been a sticker price to go with it.
Jim, similar?
Yeah, same here, Ron. Very similar to what Lucas said. We've had engagements with very large, big agencies, but I've had an engagement with an agent that's like 5 people. It really just depends on that use case and flow. And do we think that in our partnership that'll drive incremental growth to us? If so, let's partner. Here's our APIs that for what you're trying to do, meet the need. But there's no like flat out charge or something, Ron. At least from a carrier. At least I can't talk for all carriers, but at least for ours, right? But we are looking to grow with it. You know what I mean? Or grow through new business acquisition or whatever that process is with the agent. And we measure it. So, yeah.
Thank you both for that clarification. And that sparked another question that just came in. The other 2 questions that are in, we're going to get to it, but this one just came in, and it's really attached to the question and was kicked off by your answers. Could you provide the URLs for Nationwide's and Hartford's API portals to register? How do you want to respond to that? Is that something that you want us to connect and provide afterward? Do you want to share it here? Both? Something else?
To be honest, the best way for some of our agents, if they're listening on the phone, is just to go through their local rep. Like we size up the accounts first, Ron, and then we'll provide credentials to that portal. So even though there's a URL to it, you'll need credentials at least to get into it. So what we've been doing, which has been new for the whole sales organization, is taking them on this digital journey. And how can they have conversations, with business models like these, with technology? So it's kind of a new skill set even for our sales reps and divisional leadership to look at these opportunities. I just say, have a discussion with them. They funnel them in, and we have a whole process and a team that can help them out.
Yeah,
great.
That's so perfectly timed, Jim. I mean, it's good to know that we're doing the right thing. We're doing similar kind of scale ups, skill-based discussions here at Nationwide as well. You'd be surprised how many things come up that aren't API necessarily focused, right. But they're like, oh, these other opportunities that are on the shelf that we didn't know. I think I'd recommend anybody to just go ahead and dive in into some of these and just at least ask your sales rep. The developer.nationwide is ours, but it's the same situation as Jim. I mean, you get a certain amount of information until you get certain credentials to get in. So usually starts with a discussion with your sales rep, and they may point you to the same place, but usually starts the same way.
Awesome. Well, that absolutely answered that question. Thank you, guys. Here's one that's a little bit more succinct or detailed, and it's around claims data. It's been a hot topic, providing loss runs to agencies via API versus having to pull each loss run individually, being seen as a big benefit. The question is asking, do you have any plans to provide API for loss runs like 5-year history for all policies in an agency book of business? Is that something that's come up?
Jim, not specifically. I think that it's not in my circle of things. But that being said, I think something that Jim had mentioned during the presentation stuck out is that I would ask, how exactly do you want the experience to change? I think today, at least from my experience, I'm used to these PDFs or scanned in actual loss runs, right? Of faxed copy of someone's loss runs. Granted, it was a couple of years ago since I've been this close to it, but it wasn't that long ago. I imagine there's probably a better way of doing that these days. So I think that would be worth exploring. It's something that every carrier has to share, right? And we're all having the same shared pain points. So I think that's something that would be interesting to look at. But I don't know, Jim, how about you? I'm basically saying no.
I don't have anything on the plate for next year on that. I think we do around like upgrading our F&OL, like first notice of loss. We do have a loss inquiry, but Ron, it's like one at a time. You know what I mean? It's an API, but it goes through management systems or other different parties. But I don't have anything yet that will pull an entire book back in time.
Yeah.
But I do think that question is a really hot topic, Ron. I totally agree with the premise, and there's probably more we got to do with that.
Yeah, I would want to ask more. I mean, without derailing the meeting, Ron, it's hard for me to not start asking some of my questions that I would ask in any project to kind of break it down a little bit further. How different is it from our claims download than what they already have? Could you use initial loads from your do people offer initial loads that you could use? What's your business intelligence platform that they're using to actually view that much data, right? Because it's gonna have something's gonna have to build it back into a loss run view if it's just the core data. But whoever asked the question, that is probably fair, low hanging fruit. Incurred loss data.
Yep, and the person that asked that said they'd be happy to discuss offline, and I know it's someone that you both know, so we'll make sure that connection happens. So we got time for one more question here, and I think I know which direction the answer is going to go. And it's a fairly wide question, but are you considering new technology or tech agency appointments, either at the Hartford or nationwide for API distribution?
Like a new agency model type, we're saying that's more of just this tech shop?
I think so.
I was about to say, our focus hasn't changed more. Now that I'm about to say that, I've seen more come across my desk. I know I sound like a broken record, but I think this comes down to skill sets. And historically, we haven't seen a lot of the necessary skill sets aside from these gigantic shops that shouldn't even be called shops, because these are massive companies that have also stood up a software sector, right? More recently, though, we've seen some businesses that do have the chops to get these things done. And we are dipping our toes into some of these models. I'll say that historically, they're coming from frustrated independent agency models that are like, this should be easier. And so they're sort of spinning off these other models. So sometimes they are also an agent, or they were an agent, more likely.
Yeah.
So it's a small caveat, but I think our leadership would say, no, that's not our main focus, but our distribution model is starting to lean more towards agents that are able to do this. It's a canary in the coal mine of what else you're able to do.
Some of them may be spinoffs from all of the M&A, where they're taking the opportunity to move out on their own and start something as well. All right.
Yeah, it's definitely something wrong we'll look at. You know what I mean? We'll entertain it. They're not all the same though. So,
Right.
but we'll definitely just a lot of different distribution models and ideas out there. And I think we like dipping our toe in one of each maybe or something just to learn.
Right.
So yeah.
Well, definitely a pretty general question, but I thought it was absolutely worth discussing. And yeah, to Lucas's point, it comes down to how are you set up? What's your skill set? And where is it the benefit going to be? Harkening back to the whole conversation that we've had today. So guys, that we're at time. Jim, Lucas, thank you guys so much for your time today. It's been a great conversation. As I said earlier, we could probably spend another hour talking of the ins and outs, different aspects, but I know this has been really valuable. So thank you both for your time today.
Yeah, absolutely. Look forward
You're
to seeing you guys in future sessions. So,
all right.
see you.
And for those attending, just wanted to thank you. This has been recorded and will be made available by the beginning of next week. And we'd encourage you to take advantage through our virtual platform of the next session coming up, blockchain advancement in the IA distribution. So to the attendees, hope to see you soon. Take care.